Okay, hi again. So I think this should be the last video on the population revision. Okay, so population pyramids. So population pyramids are a very handy way of looking at the structure of a country's population. So like if you look at the first pyramid there, you can see that the bottom of the pyramid is very, very wide. Shows me that they have a very, very young population. They're popping out a lot of children. They have a very high birth rate. I'm concerned looking at the very top of the population pyramid is very narrow. That indicates to me that they're not really living to a very high age. And why are they dying at a very young age? Life expectancy might not be great. And have they got good healthcare and pension plans, etc., for their people? Okay, in the second population pyramid, they still have a very high birth rate, but I can see it starting to widen at the top, and that's good. They may be starting to improve the life expectancy for people. But still, those two countries are very kind of, it's developing. Third, then you're kind of seeing that it's starting to plateau out. Things are starting to get a bit stationary. Birth rate is starting to drop, but the kind of things are balancing themselves out. People are living well. As well, they're living to a fine age. So population pyramids at a glance tell you if they've a lot of young people, if they've a lot of elderly people, what's the working population like, how many people are in the country. So it shows you the differences between the numbers of males and females as well. So on the left hand side, you have the number of males in the country. On the right hand side, you have the number of females. It goes up in every 4 years. So at the bottom, it starts off at the 0 to 4 age group, 5 to 9, and it goes all the way up to 100 plus. The wider the bars go out at either side, the more people they have in the country. The thinner the bars and the shorter the bars, the fewer people that they have in that age category. So like I said, age groups go up in 4 year cycles, starting with the youngest 0 to 4 up to the eldest 100 plus. The males are on the left, the females are on the right. Like I said, you can see at a very quick glance whether the population of the country is very young or very old. Okay, if it's top heavy, that's a very elderly population. If it's bottom heavy, that's a very young population. So the bars are stacked on top of each other. The length of the bar, how far the bar goes out, shows you the percentage of the population age group. Okay, so population pyramids also allow us to calculate the number and the percentage of elderly people over 65. Now listen, I hate saying elderly people over 65. You're young at 65, but that's technically a retirement age. So we call them economically dependent group because they're economically dependent. They retire at 65 or 66, whatever it is now, and they draw their pension, so they depend on the government. So they're dependent on the people working to pay taxes on their wages to fund their pensions. Also, anyone under the age of 14, they're economically dependent as well because we pay for their schooling, okay, and we pay for their healthcare. All right, so the over 65s and under 14s, they're economically dependent. Anyone in between 15 and 64 can work, so they're economically active. So thank God for the people working. They pay taxes, they keep the hospitals built, the roads built, they pay for different healthcare. They're the money that we invest into the country. Okay, so there's 3 different types of population pyramids. So really, I suppose, kind of focus on the first and the third one. An expansive population pyramid is where it's wide at the bottom. So that's describing populations that are young and growing. It's a typical pyramid shape. A broad base, so the bottom of it is very broad and very wide, and it's very narrow at the top. So typically that would be a slowly developing country. Okay? Whereas if you look at the very last population pyramid, that's stationary. So it's kind of stopped. Okay? Stationary. So that's a population that's not growing. Think stationary if you're parked up, you're not moving. Okay? There's an equal percentage across all age groups, and it's narrow towards the top. Fewer people are dying. Okay? It's usually associated with developing countries. Okay? Or developed countries. The middle one is called constrictive. Okay? It's kind of looking like a concertina. It's like a beehive. It's kind of going in and out. So expansive, they're a very young population, very wide at the bottom, narrow at the top. Stationary, then it's just kind of plateaued out. It's kind of average across all age groups. Okay, so Ethiopia would fit into clearly the expansive population pyramid. Right, moving on from that, Ireland is definitely stationary. We're definitely stationary. Okay, anything else important? So what's the population change like in Ireland? Well, look, we had the famine. We had the population up to about 8 million before the famine hit in 1845. We lost 1 million people, died, another 1 million people emigrated. Population continued to decline. It really affected our population because of the famine. Okay, what else affected our population? 1950s, we had a recession. We had a very, very bad recession. People left. There was no jobs. Okay, unemployment. People just headed off over to America. 60s were good in Ireland. 60s were good because we had a Taoiseach called Sean Lemass. And Sean Lemass was very good. He attracted in multinational corporations for the first time ever in Ireland. So people stayed, they got jobs, they had children. We also attracted people to come in to work. Okay, so that was really, really good. In the 70s, were good as well for Ireland because we joined the European Union in 1973. So we attracted more jobs. The European Union were investing money in us as well. We got another share of the money pot. So that helped Ireland. Population grew. The 80s, not good for Ireland. We had a massive recession again. So people left. Loads of people left. So younger people. So they weren't sticking around. They weren't having families. So we saw a drop in our population. And a drop in our population as well because people were emigrating. 1990s were good. Early 2000s were good for Ireland. We had an economic boom. We had the Celtic Tiger. People were staying, they were having families, they were earning money, they had good jobs. We were attracting people in from Eastern Europe to fill the jobs that we couldn't fill. So our population was absolutely booming. Bang, another recession hit, 2008 to 2011. People left, okay? Jobs weren't there, unemployment was high, people were leaving, okay? They weren't having children as well, even if they stayed here because it was expensive. They didn't want to be, risking that. So you go through different cycles, different things affect our population. In 2022, our population has just reached over 5 million people. Our population is still growing. We're a developed country. At the moment, we're a bit worried because of the cost of inflation and cost of living. It's expensive now to have children. So people are maybe thinking twice now about having children. So that could affect our population growth in the coming years. But we are still growing slowly. Our population has a stationary shape. But we've a lot of things going on. We're coming through the pandemic. So, you could say there was a bit of a baby boom. People are at home more. But then there's the risk of a recession because people lost their jobs. So maybe people are just a bit wary about having children. The effects of the Russian-Ukrainian war, we don't know, is that going to trigger a massive recession as well? Is it going to affect jobs and things like that? The high cost of living is really the thing. So will people stick around in Ireland and will people have children with the worry of the cost of it? It's going to be interesting to see at the end of this year how things will go. So birth rates in Ireland, our birth rates are 12.1. Okay, so we've a good birth rate. Okay, so for every 1,000 people, there's 12 babies being born. So that's good. And we've had a baby boom in recent years. We've low death rates amongst babies, which is good. We don't want a death rate in children, if at all. We know to monitor them in hospital, to look after them. We give them vaccines. So our birth rate is 12.1 babies being born for every 1,000 people. The death rates are lower than our birth rates, thank God. So our death rates is 6.3. So that's quite low. That's good. So our death rates are lower than our birth rates. So we know how to keep them living longer. We have a good standard of living. We have care for the elderly. Our life expectancy is very good. We're living well into our 80s. Future for our population, they project that it'll reach 5.1 million by 2030. I'd say easily we'll probably even surpass that. We're just over the 5 million at the moment. They predict that the most of the population growth will be in Dublin and the East. So we need to look at Dublin and the East. Have they enough schools? Have they enough hospitals? Have they enough nursing homes? Can we spread that population evenly across Ireland maybe? So our population rises and falls. It varies throughout the years. Population change then in Nigeria, if you look at that, like Nigeria is a country in West Africa. They were colonised by the British up until 1960. For centuries, they were a colony of the British. So they were suppressed. They were treated as slaves. So the men were taken away as slaves. So there was very few babies being born. So the population was very, very low. But then eventually they got their independence when the British stopped actually colonising them and gave them their independence. And once the British gave them their independence, they started to grow their population, but that wasn't until the 1950s. So their population was very low up until that point. Okay, under 40 million. For an African country, big country, that was very, very low. Then when they got their independence, they saw huge population growth. So Religion, they're mostly an Islamic country, so it's encouraged to have large families, early marriages, which is dreadful. I mean, the child brides and all that. Polygamous marriages where a man has more than one wife, so they've multiple children. That's causing huge population growth. They prefer to have male children, so they'll keep having children until they have the male children, because the male children will go off and work and look after them in their old age. They just value the males more than they value the girls. The males will work, the girls no good. Security in old age, that they'll look after them, because there really isn't nursing homes or pensions there. High infant mortality as well. Okay, they have a lot of children because they fear their children will die, so they just keep having a lot of children in the hope that they'll be there to look after them in future. So they have a big population there. In Nigeria, 215 million people. That's a lot. It's a slowly developing country, they still have, a long way to go to develop education and develop healthcare. So their population pyramid is definitely expansive. Okay. Birth rate, 37.2 births. When you compare it to the 12.1 birth rate in Ireland, they're having a lot more children than us. They have the 22nd highest birth rate in the world. Interestingly, when we looked at that last year in class, they were number 20. So they're being pushed down to 22, but they still have a very high birth rate. Debt rate is 11.57. Ours is just around 6. So they still have a lot of people dying, but they are, what are they dying of? Malaria, from the mosquito, gastroenteritis, like a stomach bug, and AIDS. So their life expectancy is very low, 54, compared to our 81 or 82. They still have a long way to go to improve medical, food and healthcare for their people. Their future of their population is expected to just explode in future. But have they the hospitals and the schools to look after this, this predicted population growth in future? I hope so. Okay, and just to finish up then, I'm going to skip past that now a second. Bear with me. Second now. You don't need any of that. So who studies population pyramids? Governments. Every country needs to study them, because you need to see, do you need to build schools? If you're going to have more babies being born, have we the schools? Have we the teachers? Have we the nursing homes? Have we healthcare for them? Have we transport for them? If you have an aging population like Germany, you need to make sure that you're, looking after them in future. But have you got, if you've got a declining birth rate, who's going to do the jobs in future? So if you don't have babies being born, you're going to have to attract in migrants. Okay, so that's a concern. And you have to pay a big pension for your aging elderly population. It's great that they're living longer, but you have more pensions to pay out. Like in Ireland at the moment, we have a battle, and it's in France, it's everywhere. Do we raise the pension age? If people are living longer, do we need to be paying them a pension for 20 years? Do we up the pension age from 65 up to 70? That's a big, big debate that we have to sit down and have. Okay, anything else that's important there? No, that's everything.